Welcome to the Group 1 presentation. Over the past few months, we learned about the mass technology sector layoffs. Our goal is that our research will be helpful for job seekers and other researchers who may want to dive into the effects of the layoffs and possibly calibrate their knowledge, skills, and abilities to fit the jobs that are resilient and in demand.
Hello, I'm Brayan Murillo. One of the datasets to use is one that contains the general records of business formation by state, by region, and by country. This dataset is a flat table with dynamic availability as it is extracted directly from the United States Census Department page. Some of the attributes are geo, which is categorical but will help to indicate position, year, which is quantitative with a range from 2004 to 2023. In order to use the company information dataset and the technology layoffs dataset, the following tasks were carried out in Python Notebook. In this example, we show that the architecture of the company information is planned to optimize storage space but makes it difficult to extract data sequentially. That is why the values of the attributes of the months are concatenated in only one single column and then sorted by state. The tasks have been divided into subtasks that must be done previously to achieve the tasks that are located at the right ends of each diagram. In the first diagram, our main objective is to compare the trends of layoffs with business formation. For this, we must first present the trends of both datasets. On the other hand, in the second diagram, we want to know the distribution of layoffs around the world, the proportions that each country and sector represent, and to be able to identify values easily. Some of the idioms that the attribute types suggest tasks will be realized in BizHub with D3.js. The most important thing to highlight is the use of scalable vector graphics for the graphics to be drawn in the browser, which generates an excellent quality. 3D.js modules are important to generate the X and Y axis of the graphic, determine how a real-world value is scaled to its equivalent in pixels, and then the labels that allow grouping and drawing the line. In Tableau, we implemented map chart, pie chart, bar chart, and summary charts in tables. To do this, in general, it was necessary to perform these actions: derive attributes, add filters, add actions, make groups, and sort visualization. It can be seen that at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a considerable amount of layoffs. However, after this, it can be said that the layoffs were few. From April 2022 to April 2023, the number of layoffs in technology increased by 300%. The graphs corresponding to business applications follow the same pattern, showing that applications are always higher in the first month of each month and then decrease as they approach the end of the year. It can be observed that business applications in general in the country remained constant until approximately 2015. Another point to highlight is that the pandemic didn't significantly decrease the number of applications, and that, on the contrary, from this point onwards, the highest number of applications in the records begin to be experienced. The year 2021 is the year that presented the records in the number of applications. Companies headquartered in the United States are the ones that are making the most massive layoffs, as the United States is attributed 67.8% of the layoffs in technology worldwide. India has the second highest number of layoffs, which is consistent with the strength of both countries in the technology industry. The consumer industry, followed by the sales industry, are the industries that have generated the most layoffs in the United States. Finally, knowing that San Francisco area and surrounding areas is home to technology giants such as Apple, Meta, Alphabet, among others, it is to be expected that this area will concentrate the most layoffs. According to Business Application, Florida will be expected to have the largest number of layoffs, but this is not the case.
Data abstraction portion for the Fed inflation, which is the Federal Reserve inflation rate calculations. This data contains two columns for date ordinal and inflation rate, which is quantitative. And then we're going to go to the Federal Reserve borrowing rates, which contains two columns, date and the federal funds borrowing interest rates. And then we're going to include the tech layoff monthly data that contains the date and layoff counts. Now within task abstraction, we're going to present the history of inflation and in parallel include the trend of layoffs from the COVID-19 era all the way, and then include the derived percentage and change of inflation rates against that, and then discover if layoffs are correlated with inflation. And in parallel, we're going to use the history of inflation, or the interest rates, in conjunction with the layoff counts from COVID-19 to present, and discover if layoffs are indeed correlated with the interest rates. So with the implementation, and within Tableau, we're going to follow the attribute for type and task idioms, add filters, actions, abstractions, change color to reflect quantitative values in the y-axis, set the tooltip in detail along with a sort, visualization, and create dashboards. And then similarly within D3, I'm going to follow the attribute type and task idiom, change the color and to reflect the quantitative values using physical calculations and hard coding those gradient changes in the line, as well as using the min and max and average for the data points. And then I'll sort the visualizations with the respective axes. So within D3, we can see that the federal fund rates percentage does actually increase in correlation with the tech layoffs all the way going back from 2018. Within federal funds rates, we can see that it actually does show some correlation at the very end towards 2023, along with the layoffs and the mass layoffs in 2023 in tech industry. And with inflation rates, we can see that this is actually dated daily. So we see that there is a drop in inflation with the COVID-19 era, very similar. However, the inflation rate actually was quite hot closer to the beginning of 2022. No real layoffs there. And so there is not a correlation within D3. We can see that within Tableau, the advantage is stacking charts and then creating some filters to actually focus in on certain attributes, such as the date. So in this case, within Tableau, we have an option. We're a little limited here. We have an option of green and red. Green meaning low values and red meaning high values. So high is kind of negative with federal funds, meaning that there's less ability for investment and loans, which can boost the market and encourage hiring. However, at this point, we can see that there is some correlation with federal funds as we expand upon this, and then we can see that the federal funds are starting to rise, as well as the mass layoffs, which soon immediately were in correlation or perhaps followed shortly after. With the inflation rates, we can see that there was some high inflation at the middle part of 2022, and that began to cool off as the federal funds did increase. So there is some negative correlation there. However, with tech layoffs, we do see higher correlation with the actual rates increase of interest rates. So with Tableau results, we're going to continue with search query and derive. So in this case, I'm filtering layoff counts of 3,500 or more to 12,000. And then from here, I can focus on the San Francisco area, Bay Area, and derive the Fed rates. So after limiting, querying this area here, I can select these values. And then by choosing a select function within Tableau, we see that we have a new chart here for the tech total layoffs. And then we can see that this line is nearly the same slope as the federal funds. And we can see a direct correlation occurring there. Within Tableau, results, we can also see the year-over-year borrowing rates, inflation, and layoffs change. And here, year-over-year, even then, decreasing the amount of granularity of time, we can see year-over-year the change is very much the same. However, with inflation, it doesn't show a direct correlation with layoffs. It does show that there is some perhaps causation, and that would make sense because the Federal Reserve, the Fed, does make a decision based on inflation rates. So if it's high, then they tend to raise the rates. And as we raise the rates, that decreases the amount of investment and the sentiment of investment as well into the tech industry and other risky ventures.
Hi everyone, my name is Kevin Raj. I'll be presenting on the data abstraction, task abstraction, and the results for the layoffs.fyi dataset, looking at the recent layoffs in the tech industry. So this dataset shows 1,951 unique records of tech companies who are experiencing layoffs. The dataset was pulled from Kaggle, and it shows data since March 2020, which was the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, through current March 2023. The dataset also shows the city and the country of the company headquarters, and on the right are all the attribute names and the attribute types within the dataset. For the task abstraction, examined the top 20 companies in the dataset and observed the percentage of the total layoffs for each of those companies. Also looked at the layoffs over time by quarter in a line chart, and looked at the cumulative number of layoffs over time by quarter in a line chart and a step chart. For the implementation, used Altair and Pandas Python package to read the CSV of the layoffs.fyi dataset from GIST using Pandas, then based on that dataset, summed up the layoffs by quarter using Pandas, and then used Altair to create the bar, line, and step chart, and modified the code based on the visualization to show the results. For the results, this first chart shows the top 20 companies by percent of layoffs. So we can see from the bar chart, Amazon and Meta had the largest percentage of layoffs and accounted for nearly 30% of the total layoffs. The trend is likely caused by the large number of hires that these tech companies hired during the COVID-19 pandemic to meet the consumer demand. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lot of e-commerce use because a lot of lockdowns had happened. So consumers were needing to buy groceries and other household items online and other items online. Before that, they were more likely to buy face-to-face before the COVID-19 pandemic. They're also using social media to keep in touch with their family and friends. So we can see from this line chart the layoffs by quarter started to increase dramatically starting in quarter 4 of 2022. The layoffs nearly doubled from 80,000 layoffs in quarter 4 2022 to nearly 160,000 layoffs in quarter 1 of 2023. And the first 3 months of 2023 had more layoffs than all of 2022. In the current uncertain macroeconomic environment, such as high inflation, high interest rates, higher cost of living, and also the number of hires that the tech companies had done during the COVID-19 pandemic, there's less consumer demand because the restrictions have eased up. So there's less demand for those tech companies' products and services. And due to the uncertain environment right now in the economy, the leadership in the tech companies are being a bit more cautious and cutting costs so that they can continue doing business in the future. So looking at the line charts for the cumulative layoffs by quarter, from quarter 4 2022 to quarter 1 2023, we see a sharp increase in cumulative layoffs. And in March 2023, there's a banking crisis that started with Silicon Valley Bank filing for bankruptcy. And Silicon Valley Bank was instrumental in providing lending to tech startups. So the bank's failure could be contributing to the tech layoffs because tech startups no longer have as many options to get funding. So this is another factor already within the uncertain macroeconomic environment, with other factors being high inflation, high interest rates, higher cost of living. So this banking crisis could also be contributing to the tech layoffs. Thank you.
Anitha, and today I'll be talking about the data abstraction and the task abstraction with the tech layoff dataset. So this dataset was obtained from Kaggle.com. We make use of the dataset from Kaggle, and this one has around nine attributes in it, which are the company name, the location at which the company's headquarters are located, then the industry in which the company belongs, and we have the number of layoffs which has happened totally in that particular company in the form of numbers as well as in percentage, and the date on which the employee was being laid off, and the country to which he belongs to, and also the funds raised by the company. And we also found out what kind of attribute or the data type this attribute belongs to. Most of it were categorical data, and we also have the total laid off as an ordinal, and we also have the quantitative data set. So if you see, there are 1951 unique fields in this data set. And coming to the task abstraction, I've chosen the analysis which is performed is based on the unemployment rate over the history, that is in the past few years, what was the unemployment rate, as well as how it varied during the pandemic, which was from 2019 to 2022, and what was the rate of unemployment during this time. And for my analysis, I've made use of the tableau for obtaining the results. So in this graph, you can see that this shows the unemployment rate during the pandemic, and it shows in which quarter of the year the unemployment rate was high. We can see that from this graph, we can see that the quarter of the date was 2020. In the second quarter, the unemployment rate went up to 38.90%, and which is represented in the red color. And it was low during 2022, during the 2023, during quarter one after the pandemic. We can see that how it has been decreased, and I've made use of green color to show the rates of unemployment being low. And we can see that this data has been is shown based on the quarters, and the unemployment rate is being calculated based on the percentage, where I've added in the form of filters and made use of the unemployment rate, the percentage as the color as well. And for my second result, which was the history, which shows the history of unemployment from the year 2010 to 2023, for that we can see that the unemployment rate has was very much less in the year 2020, which was just 9.90%, which was in the fourth quarter, and the least was in 2023, because that was just after COVID, after the pandemic. So we can also see that year-wise how it changed, and with the gap of 2 years. And the graph varies from 9.90%, it went up to 14.7% during the month of April in 2020. And again, we can see that the graph, by this line graph, we can see that it has come down to 3.60% in the year 2023 February. So from my analysis, we can tell that the unemployment rate was highest during the month of April in the year 2020. Over the history, if we see, the same thing goes. It was the max during the pandemic compared to the unemployment rate over the history. Thank you.